All right, it just takes the seat. All right, it's Ryan Gerdes, and again, another disclosure. Ryan is my business partner. We both run the Real Estate 401k group, as most people know, and so wanted to get into something. Well, first of all, Ryan, welcome. Thank you for
I would say
doing
that
this.
Ryan is your better half, so it is nice to have Ryan in the room every once in a
Thanks,
while.
guys.
I'm just the eye candy of the team. That's it's as simple as that. But we wanted to get into the discussion of, we are going to start coming across people who are in default. And I know, Todd,
you're right.
You show the numbers
Yep.
up there,
Yep.
but those numbers that you show are only a reflection of what's in the MLS.
Correct.
And it's not the entirety. So I was actually this morning, and I'm going to open up my phone, which I never do, and I'm just going to read the headline of the article that came across. Said, as simple as this, Ryan: major U.S. banks are preparing for millions of potential defaults as economic conditions raise concern. And if I could click to the full story, and it just, and so it's, and it includes banks like J.P. Morgan, Chase, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo,
bucks.
and they are tightening their financial belts to prepare and for themselves to be prepared to have the funds to cover people in defaults and cover their own losses. I personally, I'm not anticipating it to be like 2007, 2008, but I am anticipating to see it, and therefore there's going to be not only opportunities for us, but more importantly, we're going to be coming across sellers who are in default. And what do we say to them? How do we handle them? And you are, in my opinion, one of the experts at it. You did your share of short sales back in the day, and we've done a couple of them right now. And so the floor is yours.
We're already seeing it happen, man. And whenever we're in these types of situations, there's no absolute rule book. And so it requires creativity, a lot of question asking, problem solving. And so some of the things that I might say up here, West USA might need to wear some earmuffs. So, if you have any issues or any problems, please email, text, call Nick Whittycamp until he...
I take back what I said earlier.
But no, it's good that they're bracing for that. We're seeing more stable numbers in Arizona. So as far as what's going to affect Maricopa County, it's not going to be as drastic as other parts of the country. But banks lend all over, right? So they should be bracing themselves. But nonetheless, we have already seen some things going down here locally, and we're going to see more. I think that probably the biggest misnomer is that when people think of distressed properties or default, they think, oh, it's probably some rat hole that's a couple $100,000 upside down or something like that. That's not generally the case. Really, what I really wanted to do today was just kind of talk about some of our stories and kind of some of the creative things that we've done or the opportunities that we've run into. Because they don't fit the mold of what most people have in their head of what this is. And so, I kind of just break it down to anybody who feels or really needs to sell their property is a distressed seller. And they come in all different shapes and sizes, and they're not necessarily in foreclosure, or they may not have even missed a payment.
Right.
There could be they could be all caught up, and the house is in excellent condition, but they see something on the horizon, and so getting in front of those and identifying those and bringing your value adds to the table when they're approaching you for your consultation is going to be what is the biggest difference maker.
What are some of the things though, that you're asking them? I mean, somebody who is, I like that concept. You don't even necessarily have to be behind on a payment to be a distressed seller because, it depends on your motivations, depends on why you are having to sell. How are you discovering these things?
So unfortunately, it usually happens with life changes that are not positive. So it could be death, it could be divorce, it could be loss of a job, it could be health issues, it could be a number of different things. And so you have to be delicate with those situations, right? Because people, they're already caught up in all the emotion and all the strife in their world. last thing they want to do is, be told that they look ugly in their underwear, So that's like,
Why is everybody looking at me? Stop looking at me.
Yeah, I mean, people hear some conflicting stories out in the marketplace. They hear that, homeowners have, more equity in their homes than they've ever had at any other point in time. And then, of course, we all remember 2020 when you wanted to go maybe rent a camper or something or buy a camper and you couldn't find one. Everybody had bought one. And it was just like toys and campers and boats and everybody had one. Well, then all of a sudden life happens. And, and so now there's more of those toys on the marketplace for fractions of what they were, probably totally worth. But it's a signal. So sometimes you can even see just sell trends, like people are selling stuff off. Why would they be selling all the stuff off they just bought? It's not because they fell out of love with it. It's because they fell out of financial.
And sometimes it's even, nastier than that. We're seeing higher credit card debt than we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Higher student loan debt than we've ever seen.
That's
so
correct. Yep.
these people are going out there leveraging themselves to the tilt. And so it's just not as black and white as it was before, where we were seeing, like you mentioned, 2008, 2009, where we were seeing values of homes just dropping off, in double-digit percentages of month over month, right? So we're seeing still stable pricing, and so you might say, Ryan, why the hell are we going to see people that are in default or see people that are in distress? Well, people aren't really people are staying stubborn because they still have those 2-3% interest rates, right? And so most people aren't forced to sell. So that's why we're going to continue to see kind of this valley until something happens. Either everyone sells and turns over and everyone has a 7% interest rate or 6.5% interest rate, or interest rates improve, and then that will spur more buying, and then values will trace up from there.
But
because
if they sell, go ahead. Finish your
no,
thought.
what I was just saying, because typically, whenever you see a drop in volume, which is what we're seeing right now, it's usually about 6 months later where we start seeing drops in value. It's been well over 6 months, right? But we're still seeing prices stay stubborn. But we are seeing more and more people that are in distressed situations because of those life changes. So, what were you going to say?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
All right, so what do we do with them?
All right. Well, so let's talk about what you had just brought up. With people buying, toys and whatnot. We recently ran into a situation where a gentleman about a year and a half ago bought a property down in Casa Grande, and he did a VA loan, awesome loan, and he had a great interest rate, but life hit him hard, and in the midst of all that, he bought a couple of quads. They bought a boat, bought a couple of new trucks and whatnot. And I mean, they just completely, leveraged the hell out of their entire life, right? And then she fell ill, and the wife did, and they needed to move back to Maine so that they could have a better support system at home because their whole family's back in Maine. But now they have this home, and what the heck do they do with it, right? So it's not that the margins, it's not that they didn't have some equity in it, but they didn't really have the money to take care of the home like they wanted to because they were spending so much money on boats and cars and whatnot. So there was still some margin there, but then you have commissions, et cetera, in there, and so all of a sudden, when you pencil it all out, they would have had to come to the table with cash. And so it was a matter of me contacting the bank saying, hey, look, these people aren't in default yet, right? You can see that they've done some things in the future, in the past, and you can see that they have basically zero equity on this thing. But you're going to have inventory on your hands here in the next couple months. Would you rather front load the work now, or would you rather wait, spend some cash on your legal team in order to do foreclosure proceedings, et cetera? Or what is it that you want to do? Well, sir, blah, 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 that's above my pay grade, so on and so forth. So part of our job when we're helping people with this, now keep in mind, my motivation, number one, is always going to be home retention. I want to do everything that I can to save their credit, save the home, et cetera. But in this situation, we had hit a complete dead end. So I mean, it was a pretty good bloodbath negotiation with the bank. It was a lot of back and forth, but what you got to understand is that they're data-driven people, right? And so when you're watching this webinar, and if you're just kind of like, oh, numbers bore me, so when Todd's talking, you're just kind of like muting him out and drinking your coffee, start listening, because those numbers up there are exactly what I use in order to negotiate and use as leverage. Because I can say, hey, look, we're not dealing with 50 offers over one weekend anymore. We're not dealing with $100,000 over appraised value offers anymore. One day on market, et cetera. We're looking at those 60, 70 days on market, and those numbers are not improving. So what do you think is going to happen from there? And so it starts perking up their ears when you can send over that kind of data and that type of ammunition, so to speak. Because check it out, I have no allegiance to the bank.
Yeah.
I will crap all over them. I like, yeah. I'm literally there solely to help out the owner.
Yeah.
And so I've not signed anything for them. I'm not on the hook, and neither are you. So the moment that you start thinking, oh, I need to go over there and help out the bank, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Like you're going there, you're representing the seller, and the bank is representing the bank, and that's how you keep the fight fair. Just like if you're representing the seller, then you have another agent representing the buyer. It's the same exact thing. Sorry, Justin.
Yeah. Well, no, but there's multiple layers. I mean, you could have that one client that's just got credit card debt, and they're having a hard time making their payments, and they have a 3.25%, 2.5% existing mortgage. They would still be far better off to sell that property and move to another property, taking the equity out of that property to pay off their credit cards. And yes, the new property's at 7%, but that's a lot better than 21% interest on your credit card. You're never catching up on
Yeah,
that.
but the problem with that, and Todd, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, a lot of those people then in 12 to 18 months find themselves back into credit card debt. So now they got
Solve the
major
problem,
credit
not
card
the
debt
issue.
and a higher mortgage. And that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And the other thing that you got, for anyone that's been in the industry since the early 2000s and saw the short sale REO, like basically there was maybe 5 or 10% of the listings on the market were traditionally owned. The rest of them, there was bank involvement in one way or another. So in about 2006 to early 2007, that's when we started seeing these banks saying, I guess we ought to create a loss mitigation department because we've never seen anything like this. Why aren't people paying their mortgages? And then they obviously started putting the pieces together, and then they started building departments behind it. But it took them a good solid year before you could get someone on the phone that knew what the hell they were talking about.
Yep.
And then furthermore, it took another act of Congress just to get someone to make a decision. And then it took a whole bunch of losses, et cetera, before they finally got the hint, like, we need to actually put some business behind that. So the other thing that I want to talk about is what was happening then versus what's happening now, right? So that let's take 2008. Once they kind of had their stuff together, they were creating dashboards. So I think probably the most common one was Equator through Bank of America, and then Countrywide jumped on board and all that. Exactly. So you could just upload your file, and you could get all your disclosures in there, and you could initiate a file with them, and then you kind of just had to cross your fingers that somebody was going to pick up the file sooner rather than later. Because I mean, there was one short sale that I did that we opened escrow in 2008. We didn't close it till 2010, and that wasn't for lack of trying. I mean, it was. I mean, everyone was new. Like I said, there was no rule book on it. I was still on the phone every single several times a week saying, where the heck are we on this situation? But at the end of the day, they still had some systems in place. They had people in place. They had their documents together. Now, if even like with big ones like Loan Care, Ditech, they only have a couple of people over in the loss mitigation department, and those are a couple of the dinosaurs that remember back 2005, 2006, et cetera. They were around, so they can speak intelligently on it. They know how to navigate those files. But when you're picking up the phone and getting a hold of them, I mean, even some of the big ones still don't have a loss mitigation. You just have to get customer service on the phone, and again, because so that's what we're doing now versus what we were doing back then. Whereas back then, loan modification was okay, it might be on the table, but most sellers felt like, man, I'm $150,000 upside down. why would I throw good money at bad? Whereas now, if they're underwater, most of the time it's self-inflicted.
Okay, so as we go through these options, I want everybody to understand where the one thing that I feel like we learned from 2007, 2008, and that period of time, and that benefits us, is we know for a fact banks do not want to own property.
Nope.
They do not want to foreclose.
They do not want it.
And so I think it's helpful to understand that when we are negotiating on behalf of our homeowners, to understand that they're not sitting there they're trying to get the most money that they can, but they do not want that house back.
Nope. And so there's another really helpful tool here. One of the things that they were doing back in the day, even though they were still just getting inventory like crazy because there was no avoiding it, they were doing a lot of cash for keys. And so if you've ever heard us talk before, we're all about giving options, right? And so if we're walking into a listing appointment, we're going to give them an offer. We're going to talk about what it looks like, turning it into an income producing vehicle. And then really the last option is going to be listing their home, because we still feel like there's a tremendous amount of value out there in holding onto their property. So, but let's say we get into that situation where they know that they're not going to net anything. I'm still going to make sure that there's a way that they get cash when they leave the home, so long as they leave it in broom clean condition, right? And all their personal
Don't
property is
steal
gone.
all the appliances,
Yeah,
and
don't-
cabinets,
yeah.
and toilets, and
I one time, and I'm sure we all saw it, but I one time walked into a home and they stole the entire kitchen island and half the stairwell. Like,
Oh, no.
stairwell. Oh my God.
like
Yeah.
just saw some bad stuff back then.
I saw people dumping concrete down plumbing
Plumbing,
line, or
yeah, that was
sewer
just-
lines,
that was
and post tension they were going over there, just coring big, huge, holes into it, trying to snap those lines. It was some really nasty stuff back in the day.
It's not good.
And the other thing to point out on top of that, like if we're going to talk about opportunity, right? Because I don't want to make it sound like all doom and gloom, but here's where the opportunity really jumps in. Whenever a homeowner goes late, whether it's on their home or on any of their trade lines or anything like that, that is reported to the credit bureaus. And if you'll recall, if you've ever dealt with a buyer in the past 5 years, the moment that they get their credit pulled, they get 15 different phone calls from different LOs, right? Now, if your LO is any good, they're not going to put the phone number on the loan application, but they still do it all the time. The same thing happens. You might ask yourself, how the heck do I get that data to myself? Well, there is a ton of different things out there, but I would say that the primary place to go to is your title company or to your lender. They have access to all that data too. And so our partnership with Fidelity has been unreal because they have their systems down and the data algorithms that they're able to pull, and the filters that they're able to run, not just a random person, but your own personal database. They can put it through all that, and they can run through all these different touch points, over 100 of them. And so if somebody in your phone book just missed a payment on their mortgage, you will get a notification. You know that they're now in distress, right? And so it's way easier to negotiate with banks when you're front loading the work. When I get a phone call that, hey, the auction date is next week, I'm like, I don't know really what I can do for you, because it might take me a week for me to just get someone on the phone, much less get them to postpone the auction date. So that's probably another big trick here is step number one. Once you do get someone on the phone, you need to get delegated authority. You need to make sure that you can speak on your client's behalf. But is getting that auction date postponed. I don't care if you have 90 days. You already want to get the postponement in place,
And again, keep in mind, they really do not want the house back.
they do not want the house back. So it's usually a pretty easy conversation. The hard part, or the hardest part of the negotiation, is obviously the price. They're gonna pull it's basically like a desktop appraisal. So they're going to like go onto Zillow and get a Zestimate or something like that. Like that, it's
Some use that.
yeah,
Send them your
They-
mobile
yeah,
app.
yeah.
yeah. They're like it's going to be very very basic and not it's not going to go through any of those key points to really establish value, but I'm looking to show that it has less value while they're trying to look at it as having more value. So you're kind of working backwards, and realistically, you're also trying to not apply for the loan. So I know that sounds weird, but you're literally trying to establish hardship, even if their credit score is still at a 780. You're
Today.
you're trying to draw a pretty ugly picture because we all know how quickly that can go downhill, right? And so we're trying to establish hardship. We're trying to get our auction dates postponed, and we're trying to get someone assigned to the file as soon as possible. And so those are just kind of like the quick upfront things that I'm looking to do on that first phone call. Now, another thing that do you guys have any questions on that?
Yeah, I want to, before we get knee deep in it, because you did talk about the fact that you're trying to do everything you can to help them keep the home. And I want you kind of just to walk us really quickly through the options that you provide, and then and what does that initial phone call look like? Because as you mentioned, everybody's getting this data, and they are getting calls. And in my opinion, they're getting calls from sharks. They're getting calls from people that aren't coming in with the options, trying to get that house for as little as they can from the bank, and and so we get the data from our title company. We got names and phone numbers, and I know for our data that we get data. We can know if they're 30 days behind, 60 days behind, but what does that call look like?
Yeah. So the first thing I want to understand is what is their current loan program and interest rate. If it's a 2.5 and they're struggling making that payment, gosh, that's a tall ask. So number one, I'm going to make them look in the mirror. Right? Are you managing your funds correctly? Are you really doing everything you can to show up to work or get the best job that you're qualified for, et cetera? And so we've recently had to do that with a good friend of ours. Actually, they ran into some life issues, and so it was a phone call where you haven't worked in 6 months. And I understand they were going through some issues, but hey, you need to get off your ass now. You need to go over there and you need to talk to your old job and get your hours back because she was on FMLA. And so she gave him a call, and it was a very passive phone. I even heard her make the phone call, and I was like, all right, look, time out. You need to be extremely direct here. You need to look for your full-time offerings, et cetera, and you need to get back in the office. And so she did that, and they were very receptive to it. Believe it or not, there's still a ton of jobs out there and well-paying jobs. And so I'm going to have them look in the mirror first. Shortly after that, if they've really done everything that they can to make the best out of their situation, then we're going to talk about robbing Peter to pay Paul. So where else do we have equity to where we can bridge this gap here and just get us a Band-Aid for right now while we game plan what the future looks like, because I do not want to get away from that 2.5% interest rate. If that doesn't happen, then bring in friends and family, right? Hey, cut them in on the deal. Right. So, hey, if I can get 20 grand in order to get my balance up to date and get me through these next few months, then I'll give you a percentage of equity whenever I sell my home. Like, there's always a deal to be made there, right? If that doesn't work, or if they don't have anyone in their sphere or their ecosystem that can help them out with that, then we go into loan mods. And loan mods are still going to give you today's prime interest rate, but they'll usually extend it out to like a 40-year loan, and they'll usually tack the outstanding balance on the back side of the principal, so they can have an opportunity to get current
And keep their home.
their home. So, and loan modifications. Understand again, if you're late to giving them a bank a phone call, they're usually going to say pound sand. It needs to be. You need to have at least 30 days to do that loan mod or more, and then your seller or the homeowner needs to be able to make quick decisions and get that paperwork into them as fast as possible. So But loan mods are fairly easy to navigate. It's usually just a pretty quick phone call over to them, and then a follow up one once you have the loan docs in case you have any questions, and then get them signed and notarized and on their way.
The funny thing is that pride causes people a lot of times to get into debt and or not so much debt, but get out of debt. But again, this is one of those things, even way back in the 2008, 9, 10 market, people and think about maybe yourselves, anybody listening, if you've ever had anything going on in your life, it consumes you. And what you focus on expands. It all of a sudden takes all your time. And yet you're just you looking in the mirror with no known options. So it makes sense for you to want to share with people through stories like Ryan did earlier, situations that happen to good people in tough times. Even in good markets, people can have tough times. So I think that was something you said in the very, very beginning that kind of got glossed over, which is, we're not in yet a bad market. Are we anticipating one? Honestly, not from the people that the national economists don't believe so. It doesn't mean it won't happen, but it just means, okay, what somebody's foggy crystal ball say. But back to the point, how do you get people, because they are prideful. They don't want to tell the average person, or worst case, their best friend, that they're in financial difficulty. I mean, Mike alluded to it earlier, not just like, what are all the ways you help them? I mean, how do you initiate a conversation with people that on the outside, and I have a favorite comment, it's stop comparing your insides to other people's outsides. And
I
it's
like
just
that.
one of those things where, you're looking at these people, they look like they got it all together, big house, big toys, big this, big that, but they're one of those people that are financially distressed. How do you have that? How do you initiate that conversation?
And you got
with people?
about 4 minutes.
All right. Well, I think that if you have any anxiety over it, you should definitely write a script out, and it should be the most brutally honest script ever. So, hey, look, I'm giving you a call because I pay for information to understand on what's happening in people's certain situations, and your name popped up. And unfortunately, I don't know exactly what's going on, but clearly there's some hardships going on. And I'm sure you're getting a ton of phone calls from people who are trying to get you to sell your home for significantly below value or trying to be predatory in some way. I want to help you keep your home. And I've done so very successfully with hundreds of people throughout my career. And I wanted to have a very blunt and very personal conversation with you. Is that something that you're willing to do?
Now, you also want to you want to do that face to face, not over the phone?
I
You want
do-
to make that
I
appointment?
yeah, I'm wanting to get an appointment immediately
Right.
off of that phone call. But I mean, you're not going to show up to someone's doorstep and expect.
the door.
Yeah, you're not. That's never worked for me. But that phone conversation, just that opening right there, I rarely get hung up on. Everyone says, okay, yeah, this might be a better conversation. All right, I'll be over at your doorstep at 2:00 tomorrow. Let's have a conversation. So I've seen a tremendous amount of success.
I wasn't
with
saying
that.
not make the phone call. I was just saying, is your part of your intent not only to be honest and upfront with people, but are you allowing them to start telling you right over the phone, or would you prefer to physically get there and have a conversation?
I'm going to let them dump their purse out as much as they want. I'm not going to give them any consultation. I'm not going to give them any direction. But I am going to ask questions, right? Because the better prepared I can be walking into that, and understanding what the ultimate goals are, the better. So I know we only have a couple more minutes, but I want to throw one more thing out there that you guys have probably seen a little bit on the market, but most of it's BS, but some of it is true, and that is the assumptions that are going down. And so we all know that the only real assumable loan out there, is VA, and then kind of FHA, but it's VA, right? But we're starting to see a bunch of people offering assumable loans out there. And while sometimes that may be true, most of the time they have not done the water test on it. And so what we've been doing is when we're seeing somebody with either a fantastic interest rate with narrow margins, we are going over there and having discussions with their bank. And normally what they want to see is they want to see an offer on the table. I can give them an offer on the table because the moment I'm walking into a listing appointment, I'm making an offer on their home. That's just part of our options, right? And so I can immediately send them over an offer on 123 West Main Street, have them initiate the assumption process under Ryan Gerdes buying from John Q. Seller. And then they'll send back disclosures, et cetera. And then that's when the proof will be in the pudding. Now, understand, if someone's buying a $600,000 home and they're offering a $200,000 loan at 2.5% assumption, there's not very many buyers out there that are going, oh, well, let me come up with $400,000 to go and to take advantage of this $200,000 loan. That's not going to happen. So the folks that we see the most opportunity with are the ones that are having narrow margins, and then we can actually ask a premium for their home because I can prove that I'm saving them $5, $8, $1,000 a month, and providing future savings. So there's if you have any more questions about that, I think we're kicking around the idea of doing a class on this.
Yeah, we are thinking.
This is a multiple hour type of presentation.
Yeah, we are thinking about kicking around a class. So you got Ryan's email up there and phone number. If you're interested, when we do put together this class, go ahead and email us. But but at the end of the day, if the sellers can't do a loan mod, and I know I can't help but think that we have a lot of agents listening to this going, I'm either in this situation, I know someone's in this in this situation, what do I do, so forth. And so we got Ryan's email address and phone number on there. So hey, everybody, appreciate it.
Man, thanks for having me. Appreciate you guys.
You and I should have a podcast together.
Oh, that's a good idea.
All right, we'll leave everybody with the quote of the day. Yeah, Haley gave me a paragraph here. Jeez. We all have dreams, but in order to make dreams come into reality, it takes an awful lot of determination, dedication, self-discipline, and effort. Appreciate everybody joining us today. Go out, sell a home.